Hello, and welcome to the Tower Coffee Hour with our series Ballot Mueller 2022. Today we have the joy of speaking with another City Council District 9 candidate, Linda Guerrero. Linda's got a great background in Austin. She's done a lot of public service work, and we're going to have a chance to talk with her. So it's Linda Guerrero, and her website is lindaguerrero.net. And we might look at that a little bit later on. Ani, welcome.
Thank you. I'm really glad to be here. I haven't been on a lot of interviews, and this will be news for you too, Linda. My health has been a little iffy, and but I particularly wanted to be on this one, partly because you're the only woman running. Well, yes, we just remembered our neighbor who's going to run, Zena, and she actually lives in the building I used to live in. And also because we spent time on the 4th of July at the Mueller neighborhood 4th of July event, you know, walking and talking together. So I thought it would be really nice for me to be on this interview. Make it a little more personal, a little more female, but business.
Okay, now let's bring Linda on so that she's on screen. There she is. Good morning, Linda. Thank you for being here.
Good morning. Thank you for having me on, and I love that you're here joining me today, Ani. It just is very joyful to me.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. As someone who had a learning issue that wasn't understood, and a son whose was identified, you know, maybe in 5th grade, the work we do to bring help to people who aren't in the box, you know, is so important. So it's an amazing background of understanding people that you bring to the party.
So speaking of that, Linda, we were talking a little bit beforehand about what you've done for a living and the work you've done in the city. Give us the short version of 1, what you've done, 2, where you grew up, and 3, your list of volunteer stuff is pretty amazing, so I'd love to hear that.
Okay. All right. So I'll start off telling you about myself. I'm Linda Guerrero, and I'm born and raised in District 9. I went to AISD schools all my life. I went to Robert E. Lee. It's now called Lee. I went to Baker Junior High. It's no longer in existence. And then I went to the fabulous Stephen F. Austin High in Rio Grande, which is now ACC. And so, you know, I feel like being a part of public school influenced me. Those public school teachers influenced me too. And so when I decided, you know, how I would move forward and be able to participate in being supportive with the community, especially children, I was going to do elementary ed and special ed and maybe social work. So I kind of got a little bit of all of those in at the University of Texas. But I found my true passion was in special ed. And I thought back, one of the reasons that pushed me forward was that people can be misdiagnosed also in this field. And I remember when I was in 5th grade, my mother was working very hard with the public school system and the principal at my elementary school. And she was advocating for these children that were in a special ed class. And in those days, they weren't even in our building. They were set aside in a separate building away from us. And I just remember it was a hot topic, and she had a lot of concerns, and she was very upset. And then after I got into college and started looking at these different ways that you could work with all different types of special needs students, I asked my mother, what was that all about back in 66 or 67? And she said that a Cuban family, a refugee family, had come into Austin, and the district had placed them all in special ed because they just spoke Spanish. And she was fighting very hard. There was no such thing as bilingual education in those days. So she was fighting very hard to get them out of that classroom and get them into a regular ed classroom and get the administration to understand this was a language barrier. And that made a big impact on me too. So my family has always had a long legacy and history of standing up for people in the community and helping others. But in my career as special ed, and I'll try to fast forward with that, I did both elementary ed and high school. One thing that attracted me to elementary ed is I started my second year in teaching at Riley Elementary. I started teaching in a classroom with autistic children. And that was really new. No one really understood it. There wasn't that much research about it. But the district had finally figured out that they needed something different, and you couldn't just put them in with learning disabled and other types of labels that were out there. And I was fascinated by it, and I quickly realized that if we could use some sign language, since a lot of them were not verbal, we could help them, like, you know, water or eat or, you know, help me. And so we started incorporating sign language, and a lot of them quickly, within a year and a half, started merging into verbalizing. And I remember a parent coming to me, just breaking down, and said, I didn't know this meant mother. I didn't know he was saying mother, mother. And she said, you know, I've never had him call me mother. So, you know, it's these moments you cherish. And then I went to a very difficult school in that it was all black, predominantly black school called Pecan Springs Elementary. And I recall that this group of students, I was a resource room teacher, so I had first, second, third, whoever I could pull in for whatever subject. And it was Christmas time, and I thought, all right, I'm going to let them do coloring. You know, I'm always on them, you know, learn, 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 learn. And so I put out these ditto sheets, they were called back in the day, of Santa Clauses. And I brought out the colors, and I turned around, and they were fighting. And they're all fighting for a blue crayon. And I said, what's the problem? They go, we need more blue crayons. I'm like, why do we need blue crayons? And they said, Miss Guerrero, we have blue Santa. And I thought, oh my gosh, of course you have blue. That's the Santa Claus that comes to you. Yeah. You don't have a red Santa Claus. So those cultural differences that you totally don't even know are out there. You're thinking that you're doing everything you can educationally, and then you realize there's a whole level of socioeconomic issues happening with these kids every day. So then I went to high school, and what touched me about high school level was you have the right until you're 22 years of age. A federal law is there. And then you start getting these students ready to exit the system. That's it. And I found more and more that these teachers, these parents, when we'd have teacher-parent conferences, didn't know what they were going to do once the kids left the system, because MHMR had a 2 or 3 year waiting list. And they didn't want to send them to an institution or a group home.
Wait, so, MHNR means?
Oh, mental health and mental retardation service, state service. Thank you. So anyway, I started realizing how important it was to work with these parents. First of all, by the time they turn 18, they are seen as legally adults in the law, in the system. So if they do not get guardianship and go through and get legal guardianship, if something were to happen and they were rushed to a hospital and they did not have this document proving it, the doctors, the nurses, everyone would turn to that autistic adult and say, how do you want us to handle your injury? So that was really hit home to me, and finding ways to get some pro bono lawyers to come forward to work with these parents that needed it desperately to get this in place as soon as they got to 18. But anyway, I'm fascinated with special education, the services that we can provide, how to improve those services, and all the new tools that we can use to foster these kids and improve their learning abilities. And they may be small steps, but when a kid is able to take off for the first time and read, or take off and be able to communicate their needs, it's so exciting.
Do we still call it mental retardation in Texas?
No, it's called intellectual disabilities.
Thank you. MHMR, I'm sorry, that doesn't work for me.
Right. That just dates us.
Yes.
And even the term disabilities, I think there's a tendency or a movement to change that to differences
and special needs, and
Yeah.
to get away from that constant labeling. Absolutely.
yeah.
So why does that make you qualified to sit on city council?
Well, I think as a school teacher, I've said it.
That's a softball question now.
Okay, yeah. As a school teacher, I think that just that background of being able to ride the wave all these years, to see the difference. You know, the district is like one step forward, two steps back. Something will come forward, everybody jumps on the bandwagon, and the next thing you know, they shelve it, and you're like, wait, we just started this whole system. We're being told we need to implement this, and now we're going to go to something else over here. And so that happens too, as I've seen with the city. You know, we get these stakeholder groups together, we make all these great plans, everyone comes, they create and craft these documents, and then all of a sudden they're shelved. So you have to be able to bring it back. And, you know, I've called supervisors and said, you know what really works best is something that I did and taught this type of method 15 years ago. And although I will implement this new idea, this new technique, this also works well. And I need to incorporate both. And I feel good knowing that I can take more of my knowledge and provide it, because I have that long history. Which brings us to how it transitions into my boards and commission work.
Yes.
And having served on all these boards has been so valuable, especially to the stakeholders, because on the Parks Board, we had certain open space park issues that came forward. And then when I was on the Environmental Commission, some of those same programs were still out there, and I could pull them in and say, okay, I need a briefing on this. I want to hear an aspect on the environmental aspect of this, and find out how we can then influence it more, make it even better for the community, make it richer and deeper, so that there's even more value for community benefits. And so, you know, that's how I see. Someone told me, you chair all the time. I chaired 10 years on the Parks Board. I chaired, 5 years on the Environmental Commission. They go, you're so good at it. I said, well, I do behavior management with all of my commissioners. I let them set the boundary, let them know if it's not on the agenda, we're not going to speak to that topic. It's kind of like reining them in, and I'm so used to doing that.
Yeah.
Well, now, though, you would be a board member, not the head of the board, which would be the mayor, right? So how would that be?
I think that finding one of the things I really hone into is the ability to build consensus, to be able to get people together and see what kind of an outcome we can create. And whenever I was on a board and commission and there was something very difficult, I would first, as a chair, take it to a committee and have it looked and studied at and try to hammer out the details. Then bring it forward with enough recommendations that the rest of the commissions, or other council members in this case, could also look at it and know that there'd already been this whole ability to look at it with different eyes before bringing it to you, so that it might be a more amendable situation, and you could have a way to get it through with consensus. I'm planning, when I'm council, to have an open door roundtable discussion and set up where people can come in, and we know ahead of time. As I've worked on my neighborhood association for years, and I was an executive officer there. And what I realized is that we would get something and it's going to council within 3 weeks. And we wanted months to look at this because it was going to impact us for our lifetime. So to me, it's important that we allow the community to know way ahead when something's going to impact them, so we can start early looking at those issues and that will come forward and impact them, and then have more ideas. To me, and one thing I found, when I did the Barton Springs master plan, and I'm jumping around here, but council had a lot of money in a bucket, and they were going to make all these improvements at the swimming pool over at Barton Springs and do some major projects. Well, there's dual management there. There's the watershed protection because of the salamander who's protected. Then you have the Parks Department. And so I found I had to first bring those two together, the two departments, and get it real clear about we were going to work together as a team and usher these projects forward. Then after that, I had to step back because there were 4 different friends of this, friends of that, and they were kind of competing. So then I went to 2 council members and said, I need this. I need the Environmental Commission and the Parks Board to come together and make a joint committee so that we holistically look at these projects and involve the stakeholders, and we usher these forward so that there's not contentious and we can come together and make this the best situation for our residents. And they agreed because they were getting calls and emails, and they were like, this is a great idea, let's push it forward. And when I was there, we found out that one of the projects didn't work. We had some of the best and brightest stakeholders helping us as in these projects. They brought to our attention something, and we had to go to the director of watershed protection and said, your engineers don't have it right. I'm really sorry, but we need to stop and halt right now, take a step back, and revisit this. And that director came around and said, you're right. This isn't where it needs to be going. We do need to change this significantly. So I have found, when I bring those stakeholders together at the very beginning of a project, we don't get caught up in all of these contentious issues that kind of halt us as citizens and residents to come together more and unite on, we're so much alike than we are different. That's yes. Really the truth, is what I find in my 20 years of boards and commission work.
So let's, we want to talk about transportation, housing, and aging, and some of those things. You were talking about something I want to bring up real quickly. As a former engineer, I understand the term practicing engineer. Don't practice on my stuff, right? Let's talk about the I-35 expansion. What are your views? What are your position on the I-35 expansion?
Well, TxDOT is its own entity, and there's very little. I mean, the city can collaborate with them. The city of Austin can bring staff in to look at designs. Mm-hmm. But bottom line, the TxDOT is their own entity. And I've looked at the Rethink and Reimagine, and they've got some wonderful ideas. Do I wish we could put all of that as green infrastructure? Of course. Is it likely to happen? I'm not sure. But I do know that some of those ideas are so valuable to us that they have been working on. And one other piece is the cap and stitch. I sat through something called the I-35 working group for a year. And what I learned was that we had TxDOT, we had the community, and we had the city of Austin. And first of all, we had to get through almost a whole 4 sessions of just woundedness before the community could even participate in this. And it was a struggle. But we did work on the woundedness of the past with this whole division and the divisiveness. But then the other thing that was great was that TxDOT said, we will agree to build the structures for the cap and stitch. My greatest hope is that with the cap and stitch, we can implement those wonderful green infrastructure ideas for mobility, for having a green space on those cap and stitches that are being identified. The city, I wasn't able to make that session. I had so many other things that day I had to get to. But the city's already started putting together a stakeholder group to work on this cap and stitch, to find the values of what it is that they want most to happen. I want the best outcome possible, and I will continue to listen to the stakeholders. However, one thing that is clear is that as these cap and stitch come together, each cap and stitch is going to require probably $5 to $6 million of funding per section of the I-35. There's also Cherrywood working on, they're doing tremendous work over there. I've looked at what they're proposing, and I believe that TxDOT and the city are both open to that, open to trying to create as little as possible a trauma. And it really is trauma. We're all going to be, I live 3 blocks from I-35. It is going to be trauma when this starts up. However, once again, I'm always looking for the best possible outcome as we come together, because I've seen it in other situations, my past 20 years on boards and commissions. And I'm hopeful that we can, again, make that happen as a community.
So let's talk about housing. You and Ani had a conversation, so I'm going to pass it over to Ani. Y'all had a conversation at the July 4th meeting.
Well, we talked about a lot of things, and then when it came to housing, I remember you said you're in favor of single-family housing. Is that your stance, and can you explain that to us?
Sure. I live in the SF3 zone. My house.
Explain what that means to people, please.
Single family, SF3, single family. And so I have the right, you have certain rights with single family zoning. I have the right to tear my 1932 bungalow down and build a duplex. I have the right to keep my house as it is and build an ADU in the back. And so that would be like, it's not, or a garage apartment, it's ADU, it's an accessory dwelling is what they call it.
Yes.
So depending on your level of income, you could do what you could. So, one of the things that in my street, a lot of the houses that I have on my street have been torn down, and they've been replaced with just very, very larger houses, like 3 or 4 times the size of my little house. And so I'm seeing a lot of that happening in SF3, which is their right to do. I think multifamily, like in Mueller, that's a beautiful example and model of more multifamily housing. District 9 is the most densified area because we have apartments, garage apartments, we've got condominiums, we have so many different levels. I personally would prefer to continue SF3 where someone could build a duplex next to me, build an auxiliary, an ADU, another dwelling in the back of me, rather than an apartment being next to me and it becoming something that is much larger. We also have a lot of students on our street. Many of my neighbors are students too. And so what we're finding out is that in some areas we also have units that can, I'm so sorry, I've been having allergies for 2 weeks. We can have units that have and house up to 7 or 8 students next door to me. To me, that's very significant, but it's still a single family zone. I myself had to go back to teaching school. I retired, and because Austin had become so unaffordable with the cost of living and taxes, I ended up going back to my classroom setting so that I could maintain and live and continue my life as an Austinite. So I know there are a lot of demands being put on us, and one of them is housing. So when we talk about housing, I love the story that one of the women told me, and I said, we have so many to me, I love older houses, and I love the structures of them and the architectural designs that are still in place in my neighborhood. And I said, there's so many garage apartments. She said, yeah, that was because after the war, so many people got the right to go back to get that education. And we had people with families that needed to have housing near the University of Texas. So a lot of people started adding on to their back areas and building these garage apartments. And I thought, how fabulous. One of the reasons I live and was raised in District 9 is because my grandfather subdivided his backyard so that my family could build on it. And so that is how I've lived all my life in District 9. So there's always great options out there for housing if we're creative. I know my own neighborhood, and it's a little off track, tried to get some sort of historic designation. And as this committee moved forward, it was very intense. You had to do a lot of documentation and surveying and take photographs. But what was another great outcome is that we started to categorize all the structures that we do still have in this neighborhood. And, even though my house is a 1936 house, if I were to sell it today, it could become something more dense, and it still fits under the single family.
That certainly broadens the understanding what single family means, because as just a title, it can be a little deceiving.
Yeah. And, several of us who didn't want to have to go back to work and wanted to keep living, when we considered a garage apartment, the cost of it would be up to almost $250,000 to $300,000. And at this age, A, you can't get a loan, if you're not working, and B, that not only that, but the city will then tax it. They'll put another tax onto that. So when I hear people saying, oh, we can resolve this, people can keep living in Austin if they just add something, I'm like, okay, I don't have $300,000 to go put up that kind of a structure, first of all, and then I would not be able to afford the taxes on it. So it concerns me that it's lightly said about how we can improve housing and not really look at the cost, especially if people my age, mature people, are trying to figure out ways to continue living in this city and our location.
And so, Linda, you talk about people your age. We predate you a little bit, and we're seeing it. We're living on fixed income. We're living in the Mueller neighborhood, which is not a cheap neighborhood to live in, and we are running up against the whole discussion of property taxes. And it's really hard for the city to make a big difference on those. And our ISD property taxes are capped, locked in, have been for 10 years. But it's still, because the value goes up so much each year, our property taxes keep going up so much each year. So it's been a tough road. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And I've seen a lot of my friends leave Austin because of that. Mm-hmm. I've seen people actually being forced because there's no other option.
There's another part of that. We have the 55 plus Wildflower Terrace building that is 85% affordable. Unfortunately, the rents go up with the median family income, which has been going up so fast in our district because we have so many young people or moving across from us who are in their 30s, just mid-30s, starting their family, but they're in high-tech jobs and make lots of money, so their income is affecting what is people in an affordable apartment building have to pay.
Wow. And may I ask what percentage is that happening to them per year, or is it every 3 years, or how fast is that going up with that?
I believe it goes up every year. Do you know that?
The one we're particularly talking about is under the affordable program, and it's they had tax credits to build it. So, but it's listed on the MFI in the last 5 years. The
Okay.
the average Social Security increase was like 1.4% on average for 5 years. Some years it was zero.
Yeah.
But the median family income has been going up well over 5%, in some years close to 10%. And so
Right.
you can see the difference very quickly when somebody's living on a fixed income, what's happening. And this is not just us. This is not just Miller. This is the whole city
Yeah.
of
Of
Austin.
course.
Yeah.
Of course. And so, may I ask, what are those people that are in this situation doing? What are they talking about?
They're leaving Austin. They're leaving the city. They're leaving Miller. They're going out. And, that's a false economy as far as I'm concerned, Linda.
I'd like to add to that, though.
Yeah. And that's a false economy because that runs up their transportation costs, if nothing else. Now they have to own a car. And that's a burden. If you're 80, 85 years old and you don't have a driver's license, but you have to get in a car to go anywhere, it becomes a real financial burden because you're paying somebody to do that. So, Ani, jump in.
Yes, we've looked at it the local issue in our neighborhood because I moved to Austin when I was almost 71, and I decided to be neighborhood focused instead. I really hadn't lived in a big city before. I'd lived in the suburbs of the biggest cities in the United States, but not in a big city. And this particular issue is really affecting the building at Wildflower Terrace. At the same time, some of those people have lived there since it opened, or at least 5 years, and you don't want to move. That's your support system, what you're used to. You do not want to move. And so this year they didn't raise the rent the full 8% that they were allowed to. I don't know what's going to happen next year.
Wow, that's really significant. And I would love to work with y'all when I get elected on how we could do a deep dive and figure out if there's a way to amend it. When I was on the Parks Board, there was a parkland dedication fee, and it was used by developers. But when I read it and did a deep dive, it was only for if you happen to subdivide. And I looked around, and everything was going straight up into the sky downtown. And I was like, wait a minute, they're all being exempt from this, and yet they're touting, come live in my building because you get trails and green space, and I'm like, they're using all our parkland amenities, but they're not contributing anything. So I moved forward to amend that ordinance. It was no longer working for us. We were not getting the fair shake that we should. So when I look at coming in to office, it's looking at ordinances and policies that are no longer working, that are antiquated, or could be possibly changed to give people something more or give back.
Well, I would love to have you. I'm assuming very much so that there will be a runoff race for District 9. And perhaps you can come and talk to the people at Wildflower Terrace yourself.
I'd love that. I would love an invite to do that. I'm going to write it down.
Good. Let me know. And
I'd love it. Is Saturday or Sunday okay? Because I'm working full time.
I understand. We'll make it work. We'll make it work.
That'd be wonderful. I had wanted to live there myself. I always thought it might be an option for me.
Well, I know they've got some openings at the moment.
Right.
And y'all were talking about housing and older people being priced out of the market. And we've actually looked, Linda, about leaving Austin. And I've been here 35 years. Been very active in Austin, and I wouldn't know what to do with myself if we left Austin. I'd have to start all over again somewhere. And I'll be 80 next year. I don't want to do that.
No. You have, like Ani said, we have our support system here. We have our friends. I mean, during those freezes we went through, I mean, everyone was calling each other, doing what they could, opening up their doors. We were all making, sure, and even it's like an extended family, you create at this age, and you take care of one another, you look out for each other. And some of my friends children were calling me like, have you heard from my mother today, or did you
Wow.
you know and that was just so important. You realize it. For me, those freezes and being without electricity and heat, and people struggling just to be able to go in their car and plug in their phone. I couldn't believe, I would not know, I didn't know how to do that. And I thought, man, that needs to be on the emergency, 101. Figure out how to go plug your phone in to get the battery charged. But people were desperate, and we came together to take care of one another.
So I'm curious, and I don't know if this will make it to the final part of this interview when Ty goes through and does his editing, but District 9, what is the population skew there? Does it have a good percentage of older people? Because, generally speaking, we think of Austin as a young city.
Yeah, and I think it depends on the section of District 9 you happen to go into. There's District 9 that still has a significant older age group in it, but it's fast changing. What is it, like 120 a day are moving into Austin or something to that effect? I want to keep it at 120. If it's more, I'm gonna be a little cautious here, but so it is shifting and changing. Like, we really need to get a handle on how diverse the population is, and quite frankly, people want to live in Central Austin. It is an exciting, vibrant area. It has so many amenities. We have the Hancock Golf Course right over here. We've got, a great rec center. Y'all have got amenities all in Mueller. That's like to me, I was there yesterday. It was like stepping into another world. It's like, oh, I could go to HEB. Oh, and then I could go shopping. Oh, and then I could pick up that cord I'm supposed to get at Best Buy. It was just like amazing how put together that model is that was created.
Yes.
Well, we actually have a vision to do some things in Miller that it needs, but I'll talk to you about that another time.
Okay. But also, like, downtown has a lot of young, but it has people that have come here that are older because of their grandchildren. I've met so many people that said, I moved to Austin because this is where my children are, and I want to be with my grandchildren. So I think we've got a real layer of a lot of ages, and I really don't know. I would say, in my opinion, the majority is still between 40 and older. But we are quickly, as like Tesla comes in, the more of these companies that come forward, I think that's going to quickly shift.
Yes, it's the East Austin growth on the property that's been open is going to change this city a great deal. I can't imagine it, but the exact ramifications for sure, but there are going to be a lot of them.
Yes.
So, Linda, I was looking at your website, and I don't know if we want to go there, but I was impressed with the number of people and who they are that I know personally who've endorsed you. And, some of the people that I really respect a lot, like Gonzalo, who had said, yeah, she's good, let's vote for her. So how do you know these people? How do you know Gonzalo Barrientos?
Gonzalo worked many, many years with my father, Roy G. Guerrero. And Roy G. Guerrero has deep roots in East Austin in the community. My father was working on injustices before that changed to inequities. And so, it was always trying to help the East Austin community with amenities. He was worked with the Parks and Recreation Department and went up the ranks to become an to become a deputy director. But, he would hire people that understood, that could work at Pan Am Rec Center, that understood the youth. his whole idea, back in the day, they were called gangs, you know, gang members that created, you know, crime within an area. And he felt like, you know, let's do something to direct their energy into something more positive. And he was a big supporter of the Golden Gloves. I don't know if you've ever heard of the Golden Gloves.
Sure.
But he got that going. He got the youth involved, you know, softball. And they just didn't have the equipment. And so he fought to get that kind of equipment there so that they could access these sports and find out, you know, it's all about inner pride. It's about the maturity level. When I was a little girl, on Saturdays, my brothers would run outside to play and my mother would hand me a broom. And I'd be like, wait a minute. I may be 5 or 6, but I'm not making up their beds.
Yeah. No double standard here, right?
So that my dad would be walking out the door to one of his special meetings and I'd say, I'm going with you, Dad. And I would just jump in the car with him. We'd go to Cisco's Bakery. We'd go past the people eating in the restaurant. We'd go down a hallway to another room, and there'd be all these other Mexicano men. And I was fine. I was going to get a Coca-Cola and some pan dulce, and they could just yak away. And then later, when I was in a government class in history, I was like, you know, this is reminding me of those meetings you had, Dad, when I was a little girl. And he said, oh, those were the leadership of East Austin, the men getting together to decide what white man they would throw their vote to. Because it was unheard of a Mexican American being allowed to run for any office. And so that was the one thing that drove me to say yes. When leaders like political leaders called me and said, you know, you need to step up. You've got to step forward. And I was like, yeah. And then I could hear my dad, you know, saying, if a door opens, we walk through it. If a door opens, get a seat at the table. Doesn't matter the outcome. Get your voice to that table. And so that's what drove me. So going back to Gonzalo, Richard Moya, Gus Garcia, those men came together and worked effortlessly, tirelessly for the community. And so that was one of my decisions. I called Gonzalo. I was like, my father's gone, and so now I need you to tell me, help me, what should I do? Okay. And he said, you get in there.
You get in there. So, I'm going to go real quickly to your website because there's something I want people to see.
Okay.
Right there. We got a pretty doggone good list of supporters here.
Yes.
I see a number of labor unions in here, the EMS department, Black Austin Democrats.
Environmental Democrats.
Yeah, so yeah, it's quite a group. And
I'm very proud of it. I'm very proud. And, you know, it just keeps going back to those communications you didn't realize, those relationships that you knew you had. And then when you get in this kind of a situation, people just come forward. You know, someone called me up and said, I remember when I came to the Parks Board and I told you an issue I was having and you jumped in it, you got it to the committee, you put it on your agenda for a briefing. You helped us out. And I thought, oh yeah, well, that's just something always, it's just like you're embedded in these organizations and you want to do what is needed for the community. And so people understand it. Just the fact that you're a school teacher, I think resonates with people, that you did it because of the love of it. I sat on these boards for years to usher projects through that I knew that were significant, and I didn't want them being put on a shelf. I wanted the community to get those projects. And by golly, if it took another 2 years on this board, I was going to give my time and energy to ensure that happened. So I'm so pleased and thankful for the people that have come forward to support me. I'm overwhelmed and touched.
Well, I'm going to show a few of them here from your website. This is a pretty good list, and there's Kathy Tovo, Leslie Poole, Ann Kitchen. Ann is the one that appointed me to the Public Safety Commission back when I served on that commission. Bridget Shea, Ani just absolutely loves Bridget Shea.
She's one of the few people I know. She and I worked together briefly when I first moved here for Go Local, which doesn't exist anymore.
But then Jeff Trevilian, our county commissioner, and just on down the list. So
Aura News.
I was impressed.
Laura, I'm a friend. And you work on these people's campaigns. You come forward to them with ideas. You ask them for guidance when you're trying to push something that you think significant for the community. And I've just had the pleasure to work with these people and talk with them and let them know that, I if they ask me, I will step up for them on whatever they need. And so go ahead.
I want to bring something up that people a little bit more like me. I've been in Austin 10 years. We have a huge population of both elders and the people who just moved across the street from us. We have 2 houses that changed, brand new people to Austin. And so they're new to Austin. So one of the things that occurs to me is people on city council need to know how to get things done and moved through. And that's one of the things that I'm hearing from your background, is that you have that really nitty-gritty making operations work, making things get from here to there. Can you speak to that? In many ways you have been speaking to it.
Yes. Well, again, it gets back to consensus building and to honor everyone. City staff has to do a lot, and I appreciate them. And so the first thing I do with the city Austin staff is to let them know. I know their burden because, and I don't mean to get into this because this is a whole nother story, but there's a lot of times directors will keep positions, and not fill them and then divert the money. That means another city staff is having to do double time. And I will go to them and I will fight for their budget to be increased. I will go to the director and say, this isn't fair to your staff. So they know that about me because I will go and fight for more additional fundings. I will sit through meetings for 8 hours for my 3 minutes. And they've seen me there with them to talk and to do whatever it takes to at least shine a light, is how I like to say it. So city staff has seen these shining lights, and I've built good relationships with them. I've also worked with department heads and let them know I am so willing to praise y'all. I am so willing to let everyone know how great a job this department is doing, its efficiencies. However, as an appointee, I represent all the citizens, and I also have to let them know when something's gone very wrong here, or there's been some problems with a program, or there's some inefficiencies going on. And so I'd like to be very honest and clear about that. And then with council members, I tell them the same thing. Like, for example, that Barton Springs master plan that needed a joint committee. I pushed that forward. Laura Morrison helped me move that forward. I went to another council member and said, hey, we've got to do something here. It was called the Lake Austin Task Force. I saw that the lake hadn't been looked at since LCRA gave it to the city of Austin in the 50s. It was a huge population now living there. And we had safety issues. We had some drownings, and no one knew where those people were because no one had gone forward to put registrations on those docks. Just saying, I'm dock number 388. I'm dock number. So if someone has an issue or a boat goes out or someone's in trouble, they can look at a dock and the lake patrol can say, well, where are you at? And they can say, I'm right over near dock such and such. These are insignificant, but they needed attention. And I let those council members know, this is something we've got to do. Please help us come together to create this. So I have a long history with these council members knowing that I'm going to roll up my sleeves and I'm going to get in there and do everything I can so that we, again, work for the citizens, the residents, the people that most need it. Also, when I was on the Lake Austin Task Force, we found a swath of land that had housing on it that were not being taxed because there was a deed that said back 100 years ago, because no one thought that anyone would live on a lake. And I brought it to a mayor's attention. I brought it to council's attention. No one really wanted to deal with it, but we just kept at it and said, you got to change this. You've got to do something. And I don't want to go public with it. If I have to do it, I will, but let's look through and make sure. I guess it's tenacity. Well, but that's one of the ways that, but most of the time you bring people together, and to me, there's always a win-win solution. There's always meeting halfway. You know, I had someone call me that he's worked on many boards and commissions. We see eye to eye. Sometimes we never see eye to eye. But he called me, and it was very funny. It was just like, you know, all those people think you're this preservationist. You work really hard on developments to make them really shine for the citizens and the residents of Austin. And I said, well, yeah, I said, it's important that you really get in there and you find that one more thing that we could get. And there's always that ability to just make it a little bit better. And I'll take that as a compliment, because he's seen me work so hard, and I've had to delay things on my agendas as a chair and say, wait, we got some more work to do here. We really have to really look at this one more time.
So will you be able to let go of your teaching if you're on city council?
I will have to resign.
I'm sure that's a mixed bag for you.
It's a lot just doing this and teaching.
Yes, I can.
I get up and I go teach all day, and then I come home, and then all night until 10 I'm doing some other.
God bless you, really.
So,
it's hard.
So Linda, you've got a couple of minutes to make a final statement about why members, the citizens of Mueller, and you know, we voted like a 79-80% rate. Why should we vote for Linda Guerrero for City Council District 9? Okay.
I have such a historical knowledge from all my years of experience on Austin boards and commissions. I have spent many years advocating for transparency and accountability. I also have a large number of years working on experiencing trust, building consensus. And so those are the things that establish you as a person that gets in there, knows how the system works, understands city staffs. I've got relationships that are established where I go in eyes wide open, ready to jump in the ring. And I also want you to know that I have spent years reviewing city policies, city budgets. I was on the Bond Oversight Commission. I was having every year for 20 years look at department budgets and trying to tweak them down to where they really worked. And I also want you to know that I have looked at programs throughout Austin. I have a very wide experience of being able to see what projects will work best and how to make them move forward. So I would just like to say that, you know, my transparency and fairness is something that resonates throughout my campaign and all the years that I've served, not only my city on the boards and commissions, but in my neighborhood. So thank you for this time and allowing me to speak.
Well, thank you. We're going to cut away for right now, but we'll be right back to you.
Okay.
So, Ani, what do you think?
Well, I'm not sure if we're supposed to be neutral or not.
Yeah, we're supposed to be neutral.
All right. Well, I'm going to have a little trouble being neutral here. One of the things that Linda just said that has occurred to me as someone who really doesn't know the ins and outs is you need to know how the system works. And Linda just finished up saying, you know, she knows the people, she knows how to make things work. And that's what we need in this fast-growing city and with the challenges that we are facing with climate change, with the increased cost of living, with taxes, property taxes going up and everything. So I'm very pleased I've had this time to talk to Linda again after meeting her on the 4th of July and walking around during the festivities that day.
Yeah, so we're going to finish it up here. I'm Ty Tyree and my co-host Ani Colt, and we've had a great conversation with Linda Guerrero, and we hope you'll watch.